All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Jason Pizzino with TIAinvestor.com. Today, we're looking at how times are changing for Bitcoin, and we'll recap all of the bullish and bearish indicators that we've been covering throughout the bear market and how this is transitioning from one macro trend into another macro trend. I'll also look at cryptocurrencies, XRP, ETH, Solana, probably a couple of others in there, and some of the charts that you may be familiar with that I've been sharing for a couple of years now that have led us into the timing of the top and the low. If you find value, obviously hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new so you can see all of the charts as we continue to update them, giving us that timing into the lows. And for those looking for extra information, reports are out today and Thursday. There is a link in the top of the video description. All right, let's get stuck into it with Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now trending higher, slightly up on the day. We got a new fresh high price, a new price of roughly the last month, and also the last or highest closing price going back to June. Middle of June. Okay, what else are we seeing there in the short term? Volume has been playing relatively well. Remember, volume is basically one of those major things that we come back to all the time because it just tells us what the strength is of the day, week, month, whatever time frame we're looking at. And right now, you can see that volume from today was actually one of the highest daily volume bars or candles that we've seen throughout this rally, which is a good thing, even though it was a bit of a whipsaw on the day, slightly lower from yesterday and higher because yesterday was a small trading range. Overall, the volume has been relatively good. So this is a nice positive to see when we're looking for a transition from one phase to the next. It doesn't automatically confirm that the low is in. It's just a gradual layering of all of these indicators. It gives you the weighting of evidence going from one phase to the next. So we've got a couple more things to tick off the list to get into that macro bull market. And this is just one of those things which continues to add to it. It's on a daily basis. And of course, we want to see that continue on a weekly. That's one thing that we haven't yet overcome yet on the weekly. The volume is still relatively low, but as I said, these are the things that build step by step. You need to see them on the daily, then you'll see them on the weekly, then you'll see them on the monthly. That's exactly how the cycles work, short term into the long term. But the long term gives you that long-term confirmation. So in the short term, we have the signals, which is why we're seeing the market continue to grind higher. Now, what the other exciting thing that we saw today was another up week confirmed. Let's look at it on the bars because it makes it so much easier. Now, granted, there's still 6 days to go in the week. We've got 1 day in the trading week, but it started out relatively well because we have up, and so far this is up. And that is up on the GAN Swing Pro. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. Look at the up bars here as we turn on the indicator. Up, up, up. This first one here is actually a down week because it has a lower low and a lower high. So it's green. Yes, it closed higher, but the actual trading of the week was lower than the prior week. Therefore, it is down according to this indicator and this signal. This is how we use it. So from a relatively solid low, it's not an all-time high, it's not an all-time low, so it's nothing that significant, but it is a cycle low so far from the last week of June. I think this was the 1st of July that we got this low price. So 1st of July, second half of the year, we now have 3 up weeks. And this is in addition to the 3 up days straight out of that low as well. So it came directly off that low price and that day, 1, 2, 3. So another nice strong signal. I talked about this signal in yesterday's video, looking at AI and semiconductor stocks in reverse from those highs, which we've seen a decline on those. If you're interested to learn more about that and how we use it for trading, check that video out, but also TIA Pro. There's a link in the video description. We're going live tomorrow morning with members and discussing how we're navigating our portfolio. So we'll look at our portfolios, a bit more of a deep dive there as well. So far we've looked at bar patterns, specifically off turning points that are of significance, not just anything within a trend, but are significant. So we have a nice, good sign there that we've got some strength returning. Doesn't mean the low is confirmed, but the strength is returning. And also with the volume, we're seeing that as well on the daily. But as I said, we need to start to see that come through on the weekly as well. About a month ago, 19th of June, I talked about how Bitcoin was trading a little better considering the, I guess, bearish news that we had heard from Stretch. Yep, Stretch or Strategy and MicroStrategy. I mean, they both say Strategy Inc., but we know that is Stretch. And they were down at that time. This was a month ago when everything was collapsing and Stretch had fallen from its par level of 100 down to 72, and MicroStrategy was crashing through support at 100. You know, it fell to 80 or so. Now it's trading around 97. But these two were trading relatively poorly. Very, very bad, you could say. Basically at lows, fresh lows. And Bitcoin was actually up from that point. It was trading much, much better. And so that's why I put up the post then, just so that we could look back on it and say, well, it was trading better then. What actually has changed? We still don't know in regards to the news and the news cycles and narratives, but what we do know is that the narratives will follow the price. And as this price continues to climb with the extra strength that we're seeing in the background, like the volume that I'm showing and some of the patterns and the sentiment, I think we'll begin to see some of the narratives, some of the stories come through that will begin to support why the price should be increasing. Once those stories come through and we see more of that interest and positivity and hopium and bullish and all that stuff, that might be a good time that we'll see a bit of a local top, right? I don't think we're there just yet because from this point, basically everything has been absolutely crushed. So, as I said, times seem to be changing, and I'm definitely seeing that in the charts and the patterns. So what else is on our list? Well, I've got some market rallies to have a look at, but we've checked the patterns on the short term and on the weekly chart. Time frames, I think, is another really important one. We'll look at that and then come and have a look at the liquidity and so on. But time frames, this is something that I shared 2025, early days. And what you can see on the chart, I'll clean it up a little here. On the chart is a yellow line of Bitcoin and a white line of XRP. And XRP has had some pretty repeatable time frames throughout its, throughout its 10-year history, at least on the chart here. It's 2016, I believe it's from 2014, so 12-year history. And for whatever reason, XRP loves to do these patterns of roughly 1 to 3 years. More typically, it's about a 1 to 2 year stint in a trend. So let me turn these off so we clean up the chart a little. I'll take Bitcoin off here. And what we're looking at here is that timing into the low. That's what I'll look at. Logarithmic, just so we can see the time frames. And the time frames from this top, this is on a monthly chart, so you're just getting the monthly closing prices. Intra-month, you're going to see different prices, of course. But just to make it nice and clean, you've got this top to the bottom, 37. That's 37 months, basically 3 years. And within that 3-year period, there was a top to a top that lasted 1 year, a top to a bottom that was 1 year, a bottom to a bottom 1 year. So these nice cyclical patterns that continue to repeat throughout its first stage of its life. That's when it was, when it came out, 2013, 2014. So from that low to the top, about 12 to 13 months. From the top to the next significant low, 26 months. That's 2 years, a couple of months after 2 years. Give or take, these are very long cycles. So 2 years down. So what are we seeing now? 3 years down, 1 year up, 2 years down. Now this is where it gets much more repeatable. 1 year up, 1 year down, 1 year up, 1 year down, 1 year up, 1 year down. Now that's happened for the last, going back to 2020, 6 years. If this low is somewhere around now, like Q3 for XRP, then that would just add to the strength. I think that we're going to see a low on altcoins relatively soon in the second half of 2026. As I said last year, based on a lot of these cyclical patterns that we see with alts. So does that mean anything for Bitcoin? I happen to think so. Exchange volume is still doing what it's doing, trending a little lower here. So 7-day moving average back to $20 billion, but that's typical of what we see towards the end of cycles. You can see back in 2022, a bit of a base formed around the month here. What is that? October 2022. Then we saw a slightly lower low for Bitcoin. And around that time, we were getting lows beginning to form for altcoins as well. Now, for whatever reason, that has shown up on XRP throughout its entire history. I'm definitely going to keep taking note of this leading into this next changing of the guards per se. Times are changing in the whole markets. And when it comes to the liquidity, how much money is coming or getting poured back into the markets, I think we'll begin to see an initial breakout some point once we get that breakout in price. Last cycle, it happened around January, February. So just after the cycle low, which could be another confirmation. So this is the blue line that you see here on the chart. And if I just draw on it right there, and then this breakout, that was a sign that the liquidity was giving us confirmation that it looked like more money was coming back in. Now, ultimately it did fade again, but we had a basing effect before a breakout. So if that's going to occur again, I dare say we'd have to see some sort of base form, then a breakout. Doesn't need to go higher, but at least if it does fade again throughout 2026, the base has to be met somewhere around where that prior low was. So that's like another signal on the liquidity of the money coming back into the space. Speaking of things coming back in particular money, we obviously need people and sentiment. Sentiment has continued to drive higher. Yes, prices continue to climb higher, but the thing I left you with, or I've been talking about for years, is the sentiment indicator looking at the cycle lows. Low and a higher low on the sentiment for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price went lower into November. It had its low in June. And then, of course, the sentiment actually began to pick up. Same thing is occurring at the moment. So I think that just adds to the weight of evidence that we're trending somewhere around a low. Whether this is the final low or we've got a few $1,000 lower, I don't know. The point is, this is probably a much better time to be DCAing, to be getting your Bitcoin. Of course, it's not financial advice or anything like that. So I guess I got to word it slightly differently. I'm just trying to explain that the signs are looking much stronger than what they did in the first half of the year. This was still looking relatively weak. And guess what? We got lower prices as per what the market was saying. The market was saying it's not time yet, but it is beginning to look like the time is coming. The time is very soon there. So you can see, hopefully you can see what we're talking about here on the charts, and I'll leave the action and the decision making up to you guys. So buying all the way down, I think, is an absolute terrible strategy. That's what we've seen now throughout the last 5 years, because basically the price at 65 grand is where it was 5 years ago. So that's why I think it's really important to be watching and waiting for more confirmation and those signals to come through to give you that confidence that the market is ready to, getting ready to change in direction. And that's what we're seeing here. So now let's look at price. We've taken a look at sentiment, structure, price, time-wise, and the liquidity. Also, the volume, which is now switching. So I'll have to update this on our list here. And the voodoo timing of MicroStrategy, if I've got time, I'll cover that as well. But taking a look at price, the 200-day moving average is up around $73,000. Last cycle, once it broke it after getting rejected the first time, that was a good sign that the bull market was over. I wouldn't be using these indicators as a standalone. It's not just like a one-off and done, because you can see from the last cycle, or in 2018, the cycle before that, I should say, there was a couple of times where it was rejected. So it got relatively close. And then you had the breakout of the 200-day in April 2019. So a lot of patience needed, because you came through this low and it took forever. Collapsed nearly 50%, more consolidation than the breakout. In 2014, there was a break of the 200-day a couple of times, and the market still went lower. So it got rejected after a couple of breakouts, and then finally it began to break during the accumulation phase, It went back under, held it relatively close, so it wasn't the end of the world, and then finally broke out before never revisiting that 200 all the way up to the high. I mean, bar possibly a particular exchange that touched it, but this is the index, so it's a cumulative of all the exchanges, right? So that's a 200-day. We're getting close. The point of the 200-day is on a potential breakout. It's a good sign that there's probably the bear market low in and the bull market has begun. If you can layer that on top of the other indicators that we're watching, I think we've got a pretty good plan forming here. The 200 week last cycle looks almost identical. Broke under, held above. There was some signs that the market is wanting to shift. You can see the volume on those up bars was looking relatively healthy. Doesn't mean the cycle low is in, and it doesn't mean that time was ready to expire yet. And you could see that the market fell, even though it didn't break the low, it fell into September, it fell again in October with some good volume here and tried to rally. Next came November with the FTX collapse, and we finally got that final low in with some really, really significant volume. I don't know if another event like this is going to occur this time, but nonetheless, I think that if we're seeing this, it's just another sign to say that we've got these times are changing, getting closer to that low. Doesn't mean the 200 week is going to hold, and it does not mean that time is ready to end and switch to that bull market. We need to wait for that time to expire. So we're now looking towards, well, as I said, quarter 3, quarter 4, and I think some of these signals within XRP, ETH as well had a very similar pattern here where it had its 12 months into the low. And then also MicroStrategy getting close to its 2 years. This was part of the pattern with MicroStrategy. When it tops, it's roughly 2 years to its low. And that time expires in quarter 4, which was very similar to last cycle, February 21 into December 22. So almost just a few weeks short of 2 years. So I think we're getting close to that now for MicroStrategy as well. Looking at these prices for the confirmation of bear into a bull and so on, it's sitting around 92 to 98 because that's the lower swing top so far. And then on the shorter term, you're looking at around 70,300, which also lines up with the bull market 50%. So 50%, super important levels for the support and resistance of the market to tell you about the strength above the 50. And while it's underneath the 50, you're kind of in that weaker spot. So it really needs to get back above that and hold above $71,000. That's the nice clear message I can give you here for the bull market. Above 71, holding on the weekly and monthly closing basis is going to be much stronger into quarter 4 and hopefully give us a nice big setup into stronger prices. And a few of the let's say economic headwinds, before I get to the altcoins quickly, the government bond yields. We've seen these rise. So if this continues on, I think it's going to be a bit of a difficult play for Bitcoin and cryptos longer term, possibly into 2027, as we continue to see the economy weaken. We've had some inflation come back, but now oil's up again. And this time with the government yields rising, it seems to be going underneath the radar per se. The 30-year yields hit 5.2% in May. So 2 months ago, they hit 5.2%. Higher yields, more money out of the system, credit's tightening, and more money is going to pay back debt. Government's going to have to tax us more to pay back all this sort of thing. That's the whole point of these readings on the yields when we look at risk assets like Bitcoin and cryptos. It's not a problem just yet, but it's not looking great when you've got higher lows forming on the yields, and it's looking like it wants to break out. Now, it's been forming this pattern for years. You got a peak here in 22 in October, another peak in October 2023, another peak in January 25, April 24, May 25, and now May 26. And what we saw in May of this year, 2 months ago, was all of the news headlines talking about this. Now we've just seen the highest daily closing price since that top, and now it's not really being talked about that much. So that's a little bit more concerning to me, because if the news headlines aren't picking it up, then there's probably further to go to the upside. It's usually when the news headlines pick it up that you get a significant turning point. If it's at its highs and the news headlines come out about it, or doomy, because when yields are up, it's a bit more doomy, then you're probably seeing a local high. And the same thing happened at the lows here back in March of 2026. And I think it was May of last year, actually, 2025 as well. It was just all over the news and everyone was talking about it. Yeah, right here, May 25, everyone was talking about it, and it happened to be the local top. Now, again, we're getting closer to it and not many people are talking about it so far. So that's going to be an important one to watch over the next 12 or so months, and especially as we have interest rate decisions coming up next week in the US. Okay. The US dollar is also holding ground here at around 101. So stronger dollar, bit more difficult on risk assets. Now the dollar is still holding up, and we're still seeing oil climbing here. So you're sitting around 84 yesterday with a closing price now of 82. So oil's continue to rally here. Some increasing volume on a few of these up days while the market still holds. The big tell is going to be if it breaks through $93 a barrel. And until then, well, it's not looking great overall for inflation into the next 3 to 6 months, which could continue to put pressure on inflation, which then puts pressure on interest rates, which then has a knock-on effect to possibly raising interest rates, and then that credit coming out of the system for, well, at least for the system, which then drops the whole risk asset story. So where does that leave us into the end of the year before getting a few altcoins? Well, midterm years are coming up. I think the government's probably going to want to keep this as quiet as possible, which is why they're maybe not talking about bonds heading higher. Midterm years, usually we get a bit of a drop off here into the later part of Q3. This is for the stock markets. And we're kind of seeing that now. They've been trading not great. The S&P 500, after this high here with all of the hype at the top for the AIs, the sentiment survey of the investors, thinking things were going to be bullish for the next 6 months, we've now seen a few days off these highs with lower highs, which is part of what we've been saying after May, 2 months ago, where we saw the selling action pick up greater than the buying. And that was the signal on the 19th of May. Now, 2 months on, things are basically exactly where they were. The whole market has been sideways. So although I don't think it's a time for the stock market to collapse, it was definitely a signal, now confirmed, that the buying action had definitely slowed, and there needs to be some time to consolidate here and figure out what this next phase of the market looks like, as we've seen AI come off the burner quite substantially. The Mag 7s have also come off, trying to rebound here, which is holding the market relatively steady. And there might still be a little bit of rotation going on here. So in amongst all of this, another positive for Bitcoin is that it's not trading so bad off these lows. So that's another positive sign there. I've given you a bit of a wrap up here of the TradFi traditional markets. Last one is NASDAQ, which has just basically been a downtrend since that top. And it also had the same signal that said buying action was stopping. That was around right there. That's what the chart looked like at the time. It had come up. Signal was on the 19th, and the market trended slightly higher on lower volume and then came crashing back down. And currently it is trading below the signal bars. And that was on, again, 19th of May. So where does that leave us with crypto? Well, it's not a bad story overall. The total, which is all the cryptocurrencies, including those stable coins, is still holding up relatively well. It's still sitting above the $2 trillion level. It hasn't broken down, hasn't broken out, just looks like it's hanging out here. Now, the volume's not great, which would suggest there's still further downside to go. But I think in the face of everything that we're seeing in TradFi with the whole risk story, bonds increase, or the bond yields increasing and oil going up, well, these risk assets seem to be trading all right. Now, of course, most of this is made up of stable coins and Bitcoin, but also Ethereum and Solana and XRP, the major alts, and they've also been trading relatively well. Ethereum has held $1,500, grinding higher here, even though on much lower volume. Let's take a look at Bitstamp and Coinbase volume. So the volume's still dropping off, but nonetheless, the dumps to the downside have begun to shorten as well, which suggests it needs to rally from this point. So overall, ETH is looking okay in the short term, needs to do a lot of work to get back into a position of strength on the long term. That position would be starting at $2,000. That's the short term 50%. Then we bring it back to the longer term. That's going to be 2,500. So a couple of nice, easy round numbers. And then the bear market 50% is at around $3,200, and it'll need to be above these particular highs here. That number's around 34. So $2,000 short term, then 2,500, then call it $3,400. And that's going to be for the strength for the next stage of the bull. The overbalances in time and price are still there. It hasn't overbalanced anything. I'll update that in future videos because I don't want this one to go too long. Solana, similar sort of game here. Remember we gave you the time frames for Solana in these rallies? Who recalls that? Let me know in the comments section. Solana likes to do 5 to 6 months in a move. And it did that again, into the top. The low into the high, 5 months. The low into the lower high, 5 months. Now we find ourselves many months down in the red. Finally, a green month. That usually has to happen after you've been absolutely slammed here. And another interesting one was 2 years off the high, roughly 23 months actually. That was when Solana broke out. So take a look at this for a Solana turning point. Top to bottom, 13 months. Higher low, 19 months. Breakout, 23 months. 1 to 2 years is usually that point where Solana hits a low, consolidates, then breaks out. Is it going to be a new all-time high? Let's wait and see. But the main thing is, look at this low here. 13 months, 17 months for the lower low in the accumulation zone. 23 months takes us to December. Q4, potential breakout point there if things are going to follow very similar to last time. So this could be that bottoming pattern for Solana as well. Somewhere around, I think it was high 50s into the price range of about $100. Let's have a look. The low point for Solana was 60. All right. Now there's a few things that haven't come back yet, volume and so on. I'll cover that in the next videos that I do on altcoins. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video so YouTube knows that it wants to see the videos. But for now, it's probably not looking too bad. This would have to be the most constructive chart patterns, constructive market patterns that we've seen in many months. And in the case of Solana, you have to go back to January of 2025, not even well before the all-time high for Bitcoin, which was October 2025. Solana topped way before all of this happened. So it's been a long time down for Solana. So this is the most constructive, which for those that aren't in the technical speak, say bullish or good looking market pattern in the short term that I've seen in a long time for Solana. Doesn't mean the low is confirmed. We need to see higher prices for that. Probably a break of about break above $107, call around 110 for a nice round number, and then consolidation. But nonetheless, this isn't too bad between this $60 and $100 level for Sol. So we've looked at Sol, ETH, briefly looked at XRP for timing. In terms of price, XRP still hasn't broken the downtrend. It's sitting about $1, $1.10, and it would also have to be well above the $1.40 level to get back to that position of strength. Time-wise, not looking too bad. Probably coming up towards a breakout soon for the monthly. On the daily, things are looking relatively good. You can see we've just got a short-term break of the downtrend on the daily chart. Again, we need to see much more volume coming through, but in the daily look at those green candles to the upside that are outweighing the down bars now. So it's a bit of a process for this to happen, and we should see a test of higher prices here. Testing, looking around $1.30. That's the previous lows, previous tops there. That's going to be at least a good start for XRP to show any sort of signs of strength. All right, guys, like and subscribe. I'll see you back at the next video. So far, things are looking relatively good here for Bitcoin and some of those altcoins. And I think it's also showing up pretty well on our total charts. All right, catch you at the next one. Cheers.